Today marks 100 years since the Communist Revolution in Russia. When was the Russian Revolution? What were the causes for Russian Revolution? What is February Revolution? October Revolution? Who was Vladimir Lenin? What was his role in Russian Revolution? How did Russian Revolution impact Indian independence in 1947? GS Paper 1, World History. What is the context about? A century ago, on November 7, the world was shaken by a revolution in Russia. Public recollection on the centenary has been scanty in India thus far, but that would be a sentimental approach to history. On 25th of October, 1917, Lenin's Marxist Bolsheviks took control of Russia's imperial capital, launching the October Revolution that led to the creation of the Soviet Union. It corresponds to the 7th of November in the Gregorian calendar, which is used in most of the world. Russia switched to this calendar after the revolution. When was the Russian Revolution? In 1917, two revolutions swept through Russia, ending centuries of imperial rule and setting into motion political and social changes that would lead to the formation of the Soviet Union. While the two revolutionary, October Revolution and February Revolution, events took place within a few short months, social unrest in Russia had been simmering for decades. After a week of unrest, the last Tsar abdicated on 2nd of March, 1917. A fragile, provisional government headed by Alexander Kerensky took over. In the Second Revolution, during October, the provisional government was removed and replaced with a Bolshevik government. What were the causes for Russian Revolution? In the early 1900s, Russia was one of the most impoverished countries in Europe, with an enormous peasantry and a growing minority of poor industrial workers. Much of Western Europe viewed Russia as an undeveloped, backward society. The Russian Empire practiced serfdom, a form of feudalism in which landless peasants were forced to serve the land-owning nobility, well into the 19th century. In contrast, the practice had disappeared in most of Western Europe by the end of the Middle Ages. In 1861, the Russian Empire finally abolished serfdom. The emancipation of serfs would influence the events leading up to the Russian Revolution by giving peasants more freedom to organize. What is February Revolution? The February Revolution, known as such because of Russia's use of the Julian calendar until February 1918, began on March 8, 2017, February 23 on the Julian calendar. The Tsar of Russia was the cause of much disapproval. Tsar Nicholas II was much more interested in his family life than matters of the state. He had an obsession with retaining all his privileges and the belief that he was chosen by God to rule. Also, he didn't understand the forces of industrialization and nationalism that were growing throughout Russia. His disregard for the struggles of the people led them to lose faith in him and the long-standing tradition of autocracy. The people were not content and were ready to revolt. They just needed a good reason and a strong leader. October Revolution. Who was Vladimir Lenin? What was his role in Russian Revolution? After more than a decade of self-imposed exile in Western Europe, revolutionary leader Vladimir Lenin, alias Lenin, returned to Russia on 3 April 2017. Although Russia was at war with Germany at the time, the German authorities allowed Lenin and other dissidents to cross Germany on their way to Petrograd, in the hope it would undermine the Russian war effort. Upon his arrival, Lenin addressed Bolshevik supporters, denouncing the provisional government and those calling for reconciliation with the monarchists. The revolution that Lenin, also known as October Revolution, led marked one of the most radical turning points in Russia's 1,300-year history. It affected economics, social structure, culture, international relations, industrial development, and most any other benchmark by which one might measure a revolution. The revolution opened the door for Russia to fully enter the industrial age. How did Russian Revolution impact Indian independence in 1947? The consequence of the Russian Revolution was for Europe's colonies. While Stalin's initiatives for ending colonialism were notably absent, the early communist movement had a global ambition aiming for the emancipation of all subject peoples. This was to have an impact on India. The British working classes supported the revolution in Russia, as did the British Labour Party. The Labour Party was to redeem its pledge. Winning the elections after the Second World War, the party withdrew British rule from India. Though the subsequent return to power of the Conservative Party under Churchill was to, predictably, delay the decolonization process, Indian independence had a domino effect on Europe's colonial possessions.